This year, we've seen a lot of climate and weather action across the United States, an unprecedented number of billion-dollar disasters. You see, we don't have the Bighorn fire. It wasn't $1 billion. You know the basic story. It's been repeated on multiple national climate assessments. The evidence grows stronger and more abundant and more nuanced. But basically, for most of you, this will be a review. And I'll just use this as a point of departure for our discussion later on. And I'll go through it, as I mentioned, rather quickly. So precipitation, we've got decade by decade precipitation in the graph here on the right. There's been some wet decades, some dry decades. There's been no big overall trend in precipitation, although compared to the early 20th century, Arizona is a bit drier. Similarly, with temperature, there have been some warmer decades. There have been some cooler decades. There's some variability. There's been some warming across the region. It's a lot more consistent than the precipitation signal. And the key thing is that, as with the global temperatures, there's been a strong and significant upward trend in temperature. So as you can imagine, with that increase in temperature and precipitation varying, that has an effect on our hydrology, including a significant region-wide decrease in soil moisture. It's statistically significant, so we have confidence in the cause and effect relationship there, even though the magnitude's pretty small. There's been less snow-covered area, less water content in the snow that we do receive, and in some parts of our region, more rain and less snow. And this results in reduced runoff efficiency, less bang for the buck for the precipitation that we get due to the effect of temperature on snowpack, evaporation, evapotranspiration. Overall, also, as we mentioned in the fourth National Climate Assessment, temperature increase is aridifying the region, which has implications for various phenomena, ecosystems, agriculture, and so on. And a recent study showed that this increase in temperature has taken our current drought from what might have been, a normal drought to the level of a mega drought, rating up there with those paleo droughts. Temperature is projected to increase quite a bit over the course of this century. These kinds of estimates have changed actually very little over the last few climate assessments, and there may be some increase in the upcoming IPCC AR6. With precipitation, the key thing to focus on is the pattern. More precip at higher latitudes, less at lower latitudes. For our region, the most confident projection is for the spring season, where we see decreased precipitation. And this is a really strong signal in the new generation of climate model projections. With the increase in temperature, soil moisture is confidently projected to continue to decrease, and this is a very strong signal in the new generation of climate models. So the impacts, as we've seen and as will continue, are severe fires, very large area burned, forest mortality, and a projection for increases in severity and area burned. With the effects on snowpack and soil moisture, surface water supply will be less reliable, and groundwater recharge will be also less reliable in the future. With extreme temperatures, like the number of days with maximum temperatures above 100, we see the historic values here in gray and the projections in red and blue. And what was the highest values in history will become normal or even low in the future. And that has implications for heating demand in the future. Temperature also affects agriculture, with our agriculture zones shifting, so that this will have an effect on what can be grown in our region, the amount of water needed, and the distribution network needed for agriculture. With a warmer atmosphere, it can hold more moisture. We expect heavier precipitation, and my colleague Chris Castro thinks that this is the most certain of the summer precip effects. Climate, as you know, is only part of the story. We have invasive species, various vulnerabilities, and maybe the number one climate risk is a lack of policy, which in part of the policy is climate and environmental justice, which has only recently really seen the light of day and needs much more attention. So I've portrayed, I've portrayed briefly a lot of doom and gloom. It's not a pretty picture, but as I said, this is a review. And what I think will be a lot more interesting is discussing with Kirsten the prospects for policy change. So thanks for your attention. Okay?
All right, thank you. Senator Engel, are you present?
Yes, I am, and I actually, I have a laptop here and I just switched over. Unfortunately, I was having trouble, as I guess maybe several of you were, in seeing Greg's, which I have no doubt, fabulous slides. So I thought maybe it was the computer. So I did switch over, but I guess it wasn't the computer. But
just to clarify there, what we saw were 4 slides in one screen. I don't know if that was the intention or not. They were a little bit small sized, but
that wasn't the intention. It looked great on my screen.
Well, let's proceed.
Well, that's fine. Whenever I hear Greg talk, I'm really just very grateful that he is here in our community, that he is at the University of Arizona and one of the top climate scientists in the country, and we have him right in our backyard, and that he's really very generous in sharing his knowledge and assessments with the community. And I know he's come up here to the Arizona legislature and been a guest up here to talk to folks. So that is terrific. Well, I am happy to talk about what is happening, perhaps what we can hope for, maybe more realistically what we might get out of the Arizona legislature, and then maybe some things that we can do about it. I have to say, it is a very strange time here. I'm actually in my office here in Phoenix. We are actually meeting. I got sworn in yesterday. I spent the day on some committees out of my office because everything is being done in a kind of hybrid way. We finally got out the rules for how we're going to operate during this increasing pandemic. But as you probably can understand, we've been thinking, perhaps any minute, the whole thing could kind of fall apart. I'm now thinking it probably won't fall apart and we will go forward. But it has been just a very, very strange start to a legislative session. And, having the pandemic on top of, the worsening, well, we've always known how bad the climate crisis is, but we also have very, very tangible proof of that in things like the high temperatures just extraordinary high temperatures, as well as the extraordinary wildfire season. And we're going to be probably breaking more records. It seems like even the end of this week in terms of temperature going up into the 80s. And here it is only, the first second week of January. So in terms of the legislature, with that as an introduction, there are many of us who are, we're back at it, introducing our climate and energy and water related bills. We did have the election was both a wonderful thing in that we elected Biden and Kamala Harris. And so we are hoping that we see some pretty major changes on environmental and climate issues at the federal level. And it was just so gratifying to see how Biden did embrace the issue of climate change and did make it an issue, and that it was even an issue finally in our presidential debates. That was really very historic. And I hope you also all know also about something called the Congressional Review Act, which gives the power of Congress to, now that we have gotten a majority, I shouldn't use the word we, I'm sure this is probably a nonpartisan group, but the Democrats now have control of the Congress. They are able to repeal rules that were enacted within 180 days of the new Congress. So some of Trump's not so good rules on the environment, I think Congress may act, I hope they do, they can actually repeal them if they are within 180 days of the new Congress coming in. So that is all great news. Unfortunately, while some of us really fully expected, not only hoped, but definitely we really did expect that the blue wave would reach down into the state legislature, it did not have all the effect that it needed to. So we did not win. We did pick up 2 seats, one here in the Senate, which brought the partisan breakdown to 16-14, Republican to Democrat. In the Arizona House, while we did pick up 1 Democratic seat, we lost a Democratic seat. So in that body, we are once again 31-29, and probably all of you know this, but it has always been astounding to me how big a difference that 1 more legislator could make, because this is very much a majority rules institution. And so the Democrats do not have control of any of the committees. And if it's a partisan issue, which unfortunately climate and energy issues have been, hopefully we will be able to push back against that this session, but unfortunately it has been cast in a partisan light. It has really prevented the progress in the legislature. So nevertheless, I think we've got some great bills that will be introduced. We will work very hard to see if we can get hearings on those bills and see what we may be able to accomplish. On my side, I am again introducing my Clean Cars bill. This would have Arizona adopt the California Clean Cars standards that are now been adopted by, some of you are more experts. Somebody like Robert Bulichek probably knows the number off the top of his head. Is it 16 states now? And the District of Columbia, or is it 15, who now have the clean car standards with the EV sale mandate as part of it. I actually had a very interesting conversation with the lobbyist for Lucid Motors, which is a new EV manufacturer that's coming into, which is in Casa Grande, and they have started to manufacture EV cars. And they have a very aggressive schedule for churning out EV cars. They are actually a big advocate for the clean cars standards. They're not sure that it will be able to get through the legislature. They're interested in perhaps seeing if they could maybe even get an executive order on this. I think that's probably not that likely, but one can hope. But that just shows that, you know, we now have industry that has a stake in clean, you know, the manufacture of clean products, such as EV cars. So I'm hoping that that will start to shift the conversation in terms of getting more support for clean cars and lower emitting cars. I also have a bill to put together a climate advisory committee. This is really picking up where we left off during the Napolitano years. As many of you know, she had a climate change advisory group. I had actually just moved to Arizona in just before that, and I was very proud to have been appointed to her climate advisory group, and they put out just a wonderful report in 2007 about all kinds of things that Arizona could do to address climate change. And promptly Napolitano left, and basically that report was put on a shelf. Nevertheless, the process, the stakeholder process, I think was a good one. And considering the politics of our legislature right now, I think if we were able to get a study committee that was told that it had to put together a climate change plan, and as part of the legislation, the plan must have sufficient elements such that it meets a greenhouse gas reduction goal. And the goal that is in that is in the bill is one that was just adopted by Colorado, which is a reduction by 50% below 2005 levels in Arizona by 2030 and 90% below 2005 levels by 2050. So I'm hoping that, you know, if we can't actually pass climate change measures, that at least we can pass a bill that puts together a stakeholder-driven planning group. So that bill will be introduced in the Senate, and it may be mirrored in the House. Senator Steele, Victoria Steele from District 9 in Tucson, she also has several climate-related bills. She has 2 EV-related bills. One would make sure that the state fleet, all new cars have to be EV after this year, and another bill that would require, in giving out building permits, all buildings have to be equipped with an EV charging station. There are likely other climate bills that I am not aware of. Again, we still are very much at the very beginning of this legislative session. And we haven't had an opportunity to really sit down with the committee chairs to see if we can get hearings on these bills. That's an important thing to do. Related to climate, of course, is things like energy. I actually have a bill on energy efficient appliance standards. There is a lot of preemption in this area. Nevertheless, I have a call with a national group tomorrow about how we can weave our way around that federal preemption so that we can have more aggressive energy efficiency standards for appliances here in Arizona. Water bills. Water is also a big user of energy, especially the way we push it around in the state of Arizona. So having water conservation is also an energy conservation measure. I have a bill to adopt more efficient plumbing fixtures to conserve water as well as to conserve energy. And of course we have, there's a suite of different water bills that I can tell you more about. And of course we're really here in a pickle, I think. Increasingly here in Arizona, we are really facing drought conditions as Greg discussed. And this is going to put much more pressure for us to wisely manage the water that we have. And so far, I think my analysis of what most folks are doing is kind of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic just to distribute the losses between different sectors of the economy, as opposed to taking real action to actually conserve our water and to use it more wisely and make sure that there's some left over for the environment. Let's see. I think that's all I really have in terms of telling you about the legislature. I'd be happy to tell you more about who's on the committees. I don't know if folks are interested in that. Senator Sini Kerr is the chairwoman of the Senate Natural Resources Committee. She is a farmer. She owns a dairy farm, and most of her interests really lie in agriculture. And she does not think we really have any real problem with water. She says we have plenty of water, it's just in the wrong place. That doesn't help too much in my book. Senator TJ Shope from the Coolidge area, he is the vice chair of the Senate committee. Over in the House, Representative Gail Griffin is again the chairwoman of the House Natural Resources Committee, and I'm not quite sure who is the vice chair over there. I'm very much looking forward to Environment Day. It is something that really, I think it's always come off well. I don't know exactly how that will work this time around with everything being virtual, but it usually has been a wonderful opportunity to highlight issues. And Sandy Barr and others have done a great job of organizing and making sure that there are constituents that are visiting with every single Arizona legislature. And if you are planning to be part of that, I would really encourage you to do so. It is an opportunity to talk to people who usually don't have environment front and center in their concerns. So I wish I had a more optimistic report for all of you. You know, the same sort of dynamic that we've had in the past, unfortunately, I think we're going to see more of. And I think, you know, the ways to cut through this partisan divide is unfortunately to really emphasize the manner in which not paying attention to climate issues is really going to hurt us economically, and that the more we can do now, the better off we will be later. So I am happy to answer questions, and I had hoped that I would actually have a slide presentation on some of these things for you, but I have to say it has been just crazy busy and up here, and often a lot because only just like yesterday did people realize we really do have a legislative session, and it became clear that the leadership is going to try to move forward with things. And things are just been very, very disorganized. So with that, I'll stop talking and I'd be happy to answer questions however you all would like to run this.
Thank you, Senator Engel. One of the things that came up a few times in chat during your presentation was, is there a way that people can find out the bill numbers? I don't, maybe sometimes early in a session, the numbers are not there, but they can find out and put their word in favor or of the bills that you announced.
Yes, and a lot of people don't know this, but the Arizona legislature actually has a very user-friendly website. And I will, it's actually much more user-friendly than folks might imagine. You can easily search, you could search by keywords. You can find bills, you can find the entire history of bills, and it goes back years. You can see, you know, bills that were introduced, you know, last year, the year before that. It is all accessible on and if we have actually, you know, I don't know when I'd be happy to do, I don't know if everybody is interested in this, but I'd be happy maybe even at like the end of our session tonight to share my screen and just walk people through that website because it is actually a gold mine. And there, you know, right now, actually, we are in the process of dropping our bills, and there's various deadlines that we operate according to, and neither the House nor the Senate have met their deadlines for dropping bills. So only this morning did I drop about 4 environmental bills, and they should actually now be available on the website. But there's a lot to come. So yesterday and today, members were starting to drop their bills, and they will continue to do so really for the next, you know, good 3 weeks. So if you don't see something now, you know, my email is full of, you know, drafts that I'm getting back of bills that I then asked to go into an official intro set, which is what is actually then given to the clerk's office. So I'd be happy to do that maybe at the end of the session if folks might be interested in sticking around.
I think we'll have time for that. I wanted to address a question to Professor Garfin as well. We heard in Senator Engel's presentation about goals for carbon emission reductions, pretty hard to reach goals, serious goals. And we know that's because if we don't get those serious reductions, we're not going to make the Paris goals at all. So could you give us an idea what kind of annual reductions? Sometimes we look 10, 20, 30 years in the future. If we were to put that on an annual basis and we wanted to maintain temperature rise well below 2 degrees Celsius, what would that look like on a year-to-year basis, reduction of carbon emissions? You need to unmute, please.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's a really great question, and I'm not prepared to answer it. So I suspect out of the 40 or so people here, someone probably has their finger on the pulse of that.
Dwayne, I thought you'd done some research on that question.
I had a number out there, and I'm not a climate scientist, but in my mathematical and reading the science, it looked to me like it would take about 8% every year reduction over the prior year in order to keep it below well below 2 degrees Celsius temperature rise. Are there other questions? I put it out there to the big group. I know there's a lot of things that have been coming up in the chat. If you had that and you'd like to put it in words to the group, feel now's a good time.
John Isley's been trying to.
Yeah. I have a question for Kirsten. How you doing? Nice to see you. We had conversations in the long past about pace. Is there any way that we could maybe move pace along in this particular session this year?
Well, You know, I actually have been meaning to contact you because it's one of those issues. I have been actually doing a bit of looking around on different policies for how to help folks, you know, have the resources they need to be able to, you know, install solar energy or, you know, energy efficient water heaters, etc. And the PACE bill was one of them. And the PACE bill really works through basically, you know, putting a, you know, if you take out a loan to purchase those items and then you basically use the property as collateral on that. What I have been trying to figure out is with interest rates so low right now and the continued sort of skittishness about using that PACE for residential properties, should we be looking for other mechanisms that are not kind of collateral based, but instead are things like there's legislation out of California which provides that homeowners can pay off on their utility bills any kind of investment that they make in things like solar panels. So I've actually just located a California bill with this other approach. And to tell you the truth, I'm wondering if it might be more user-friendly than the PACE approach. But we have the PACE bill. I still don't have any businesses that I have located that are telling me we need this PACE bill. So maybe this is a conversation you and I should have about what is the best policy approach for trying to make affordable. And I think we do want to make it affordable for residents as well as commercial properties. Things like, you know, solar energy and, you know, energy efficient upgrades.
Yeah.
I don't know how to raise my hand, so I'll just jump in here. I have a comment on PACE. As a rental property owner, it leaves me out entirely. You cannot use PACE for anything where the tenant pays the bills, and 46% of the population inside Tucson are renters. So I personally think PACE is a terrible idea because it excludes half the population. So that's my comment. The on-bill legislation you're talking about, Kirsten, is the alternative, and I strongly urge you to look into it. I have a question for either of you because it has a technical and a political dimension to it. At the beginning of last year, I had the opportunity to interview both Ken Seychelles, who's the chief modeler for PAD, and Brad Udall. And I asked them both the same question. Your prediction is a certain thing. In the case of CAP, is a gradual increase in supply for the next half century. In the case of Udall and Overpeck, it's a 20% reduction in average flow by mid-century. I asked them, are your predictions compatible with the other? And their answer was a flat out no. both of them believe that the official projections from CAP and the academic projections from Udall and Overpeck are completely incompatible. So if that's, Greg, do you think that's true? And Kirsten, if it is, what do we need to do with the laws if we're predicting something completely unlikely?
So I'm not sure I really understand the details of what you were describing, Trace, but in the generality, what you're saying is that CAP is, and I've never heard this, by the way, that CAP is projecting an increase in water supply. Is that correct?
That's correct. The projections apparently are based on salinity control measures and other sources of water which would allow them to continue to provide.
So I think these are two different things. I think you're talking about a planning program that CAP has, and what Udall and Overpeck have done is to try to estimate the potential reduction in Colorado River surface water flow. So I think we're talking about apples and oranges.
Well,
you know, what CAP, I mean, based on your description, it sounds like you're talking about what Ken Seashoals maybe given some other projection of future Colorado River water, the kinds of measures that CAP might be thinking of to ensure that they can deliver water. Because salinity control is not something that would ever come into a projection of future water supply. It might have something to do with meeting the demands. In other words, if the Colorado River flow is below a certain threshold, then there might have to be some kind of augmentation or something to meet the treaty with Mexico, in other words, to provide water that meets the salinity standard in that treaty.
So are you saying, Greg, that you don't see a conflict between the increasing aridity from rising temperatures and the delivery of water from the CAP?
No, that's not at all what I said. What I said is, I think if CAP is talking about an increasing water supply, I suspect they're talking about some kind of portfolio that is augmented, and that they're not talking about strictly the flow of the Colorado River.
Okay.
I mean, I've spoken with Ken Seashoals too, and I've never heard anything along those lines. If anything, they're planning for potential future decreases in supply. However, if this could also be an issue of timescale. There may have been a Bureau of Reclamation 24-month projection, which might be something that CAP uses in their planning, that for a particular set of years said, okay, the snowpack was above average, and we think that the supply will increase over X number of months. But without those details, it's hard for me to pick out what you're saying.
Shirley had a question quite a while ago, and I wonder if, I'm sorry, Julie, was your question still standing, Julie?
Did you mean Juliana?
Julie Hendricks?
Oh, no.
I thought you had a question for Kirsten.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I would love to hear if there are moderate Republicans in either branch that you feel like you can work with on environmental issues.
Well, you know, I'm hoping that that will be the case. I think I have some moderate hopes for Senator Shope in the Senate. He's been on the more moderate side. I did serve with him last year in the House, and I have to say that his votes in the committee, he never voted against anything that Gail Griffin put forward. And unfortunately, he didn't really take a leadership stance on that committee last year. But he is one of the more moderate members of the Republican Party, and he is the vice chair of this committee in the Senate. So I'm hoping he might be an ally. You know, the real problem is, you know, there could be pockets of moderation, but unfortunately in the House, Representative Griffin really has a pretty steely grip on that committee in the House, and most of the bills that are heard are her bills, not entirely, but a lot. I'm just learning the players here. I know that in the past, in the Senate, they've been able to get non-voting hearings for some of these environmental bills. And so there was a hearing on what we've called the Ecological Water Bill, a bill that would enable owners of water rights to leave their water in a water system and not let it pass down to junior water users under Western water law here in Arizona, but instead to stay in the watershed to nourish the environment, the ecology. And it's a very good progressive approach, and it's a good bill. She was willing to have a non-voting hearing on that bill. And actually, I just talked to the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and that's his approach on criminal justice reform bills. He's willing to hear some of the bills if they are not up for a vote. Now, of course, it's very disappointing on the one hand. We want to pass these bills. We don't just want to talk about them, but it is a start. And if that is what we need to get a good conversation about some of these policy measures, then we should definitely, you know, not turn that down. So that may be where we might have to start this year. I know that, you know, there's some other senators that I have the sense of are more moderate. I just haven't interacted with them and know really where they come out on some of these environmental bills.
Thank you.
Can I raise another issue that I know there's probably more comments in the chat and I just haven't been able to look at them. Another thing that I think everybody has to have on their radar, and I don't know if you've talked about in your meetings before, is the Arizona Corporation Commission. I think there was a question posed about now Chairwoman Leah Marquez Peterson, who's now the chair of that. I actually did have a meeting with her about a month ago. What I really wanted to do is very much encourage her, and with respect to the vote by the commission to have a new renewable, energy standard for utilities in the state. And the ACC will be undergoing rulemaking pursuant to the 3-2 vote that the ACC had earlier this fall. You probably all know about this, but it is something of a breakthrough, and Commissioner Peterson did vote for that. So that, I think, is a very, very positive step. She is a Republican, but she is from Tucson. And I think anything that we can do to encourage her and support her in continuing and making sure that those rules actually come through, I think is very much worth our while. At the same time, I think we have to be on the lookout for efforts in the legislature to try to undercut that. You may know of a Supreme Court, Arizona Supreme Court case that was handed down last summer, which really, in what us lawyers call dicta, because it wasn't necessary for the holding of the case, discussed how really the energy standards part of what the commission does would be separate from its rate making authority, and would be basically subservient to what the legislature might try to do in that same arena with respect to energy standards. And that right now, I have to say, is a very, very scary thought. So there could be efforts here in the legislature. I haven't heard of anything concrete, but there could be efforts to run with that dicta from that Supreme Court decision in the Johnson Utilities case to try to undercut what we're now seeing the Arizona Corporation Commission do. So please look out for that.
I wonder, there were a number of chatters, who would really like to see Professor Garfin, your slides again. Perhaps you could try again and see if we can see them one at a time. And we can just keep going with some questions while they're there and get a chance for some visual as well as auditory interactions. You're on mute.
Sure, I'll give it another try. Right.
See if maybe do the slideshow option.
Yeah, sorry, I've made a few changes here to try to facilitate this. So let's see what happens. So now in theory, you're seeing a screen full of slides. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And now are you seeing a single slide?
The same one that we saw during your entire presentation, yes.
Okay, how about now?
That's the country we're seeing. Yes, that's a new one.
Okay. So I was talking about what a busy year it was and how we've seen this last year an unprecedented number of billion-dollar weather and climate disasters. And, you know, these are just the billion, you know, the threshold here is $1 billion, but it really doesn't show us anything about the large Colorado fires, the horror of the California and Oregon, Washington fires, nor does our own Bighorn fire show up in this list. Nonetheless, you know, this is pretty remarkable. It beats the old record considerably. I mentioned that the messages from the last 3 national climate assessments have been fairly consistent. There have been some nuances, some changes, and an increasing amount of evidence, but the temperature projections shown back here from, I want to say 2009, are probably not unlike the projections that showed up in the 3rd climate assessment and the 4th climate assessment. And from what I have seen of the newest generation of climate models, that those ranges will maybe change slightly, but not a whole lot. So, this is kind of a review. I talked about how precipitation in our region, this is decade by decade precipitation across this 6-state region. This is really dominated by variability and not by a trend. The trend has been very small, in fact, perhaps negligent. But really, we see these episodes of wet periods and dry periods, and we know by and large, the reason for those episodes is the interaction between primarily the atmosphere and Pacific Ocean. In contrast with temperature, there's also decade to decade variability, but there's a really strong trend. And that's the human-caused change in temperature globally, and this is the regional manifestation of that. That increase in temperature changes various things in hydrology, including soil moisture, which I mentioned has decreased. Snowpack, in our region, we're seeing less snow-covered area, less water content in snow, and an increasing fraction of late winter and early spring precipitation falling as rain rather than snow at elevations lower than around 7,000 feet. And these things add up to send less water into our streams and reservoirs. I also mentioned that increasing temperatures, there's an increasing consensus that it's aridifying the region through the effects on soil moisture, snow, and evaporation. I expect that there'll be a flurry of papers in the next couple of years quantifying the effect on evapotranspiration, which there's a bit of nuance there because wind plays a big role in evapotranspiration. I also mentioned this recent study on mega drought, and I won't go through the diagrams one by one, but here in the bottom right, the contributions of temperature and relative humidity, both of which are kind of controlled by temperature, have taken our current drought, which is severe, and catapulted it into the ranks of mega drought, ranking amongst the, I don't know, top 10 or so droughts in the last 1,200 years. The climate models, the most recent national climate assessment show strong increases in temperature if we don't do much to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And again, this is a robust finding for the next generation of models, and we'll see, the results of that in the upcoming IPCC report, and then the next national climate assessment, which is scheduled for 2023. The IPCC report should be coming out, I think, in 2 years. The key thing with precipitation, there's a lot more spatial variability. There's also a lot more uncertainty, but the key thing is that the pattern is robust. with increasing amounts of precipitation at higher latitudes, decreasing amounts at lower latitudes. And for our region, and this is true for the new generation of models, the most robust projections are for the spring and somewhat for the winter, with decreasing precipitation in the southern part of the region, but possible increases in precipitation in the northern part of the region, including the upper Colorado River Basin. Nonetheless, the increase in temperature we expect will confidently decrease soil moisture across the region, across all seasons, and this is another robust result in the new generation of models. We've seen, many, many impacts, but I'll just go over a few of them. Increases in fire severity that are partly attributable to the increase in temperature. Certainly increases in the acres burned that are partly attributable to increases in temperature. Changes in forest mortality, increased forest mortality attributable in part to increased temperature, and projections of future increases in acres burned across our region. Water supply is projected to be less reliable due to the effects of temperature on snowpack and soil moisture. The number of days with temperatures over 100, which is, it's a convenient metric. It doesn't have any relation to anything that relates to physiological temperature, but nonetheless, the take-home message here is that the highest numbers in the historic record, shown here in gray, become normal or even, below normal numbers of days with temperatures over 100 in the future, based on high greenhouse gas emissions. And as I mentioned, that has ramifications for heating. Cooling rather. Increases in temperature will change the kinds of crops that we're able to grow in the region. Notably, crops that people are investing a lot in lately, those are tree crops. And they need, some of those tree crops, many of them, need a certain number of chill hours in order to produce blossoms and fruit. So it may be that those turn out to be not particularly good investments in the future. And a warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture, so we anticipate increased heavy precipitation, and my colleague Chris Castro here at the U of A thinks that this is perhaps the most robust of the summer precipitation projections, is that we'll get more intense precipitation. I mentioned that climate's only part of the issue. You all know that there are a whole host of other things, including policy, which we've talked about this evening. Climate justice, has finally broken the surface of, I know many of you, this has been your consciousness for a long time, but it's really this summer, this year, I think really we've made tremendous strides in bringing this to the attention of the general public. And I'll leave it there.
Greg, I wanted to, what? I wanted to ask about what you said about transformation,
Transpiration, yeah.
transpiration, and the effect of wind. Are we seeing, are there any measures of whether we're seeing more and more intense wind events in our area?
No, actually, we don't have really robust projections for wind. One of the things that, so if I remember correctly, we may, in fact, in the southern part of the Southwest experience lower wind speeds, but further to the north, there might be higher wind speeds. But I'm not aware of any robust projections for wind.
Okay. It sure feels like there are more severe winds. But that's,
Yeah, it's pretty noisy, as it were.
We are approaching a time when we want to kind of close this section of the meeting. I do want to just let maybe another 1 or 2 questions. If there's somebody who's been waiting and hasn't asked a question yet, maybe now is your time.
Well, I just put in a second pitch for the working groups. If you're interested in building resilience or the zero waste or the other working groups we have, please put your information in the chat. Thank you.
More questions for our speakers tonight.
I just want to say something about where people can look up the information about the working group. If they go to our website, Sustainable Tucson's website, all the working groups are listed on there.
Someone is sharing screen and I'm not sure they know that. We have a white dot.
I wanted to comment, Susan Waits put in just a great question. You know, what is my strategy this next year going to be to try to get more attention to this? And it's, you know, it's the $1 million question of how do we get attention to these issues when in this very partisan atmosphere that we are in. We are also dealing with, of course, you know, these other overwhelming issues such as, you know, insurrections at our Capitol and the pandemic too. So, you know, I think that, you know, one thing that one of the dynamics that we have while we do have this partisan breakdown is it's very much an urban rural breakdown as well as a Democratic Republican one. And so, you know, if you all can think of ways in which we can really demonstrate the ways in which climate change is affecting, you know, agricultural productivity, how is it affecting our rural areas? We need to message that, because those are from at least the Republican side in the legislature, those are the people who are the most active on natural resources and water issues. Our representatives from more rural areas who have some real stake in agriculture. And I'm not sure that we have entirely work well in really explaining and understanding the impacts of climate change. I know this work is done. I don't know that we are as familiar with that as we are with things like, you know, the heat in the urban center and things like that. So just something to put out there of something that we need to be able to be more more articulate and facile with that discussion.
Looks like Stephen Menke, you have a question?
Just sort of a comment on the rural outreach, and that's been in my area of expertise during my career. And one of the main things is trying to figure out how to use the water. You know, you can put 50 or 60 inches a year onto alfalfa and overfeed cattle, or you can use it for other purposes where you use a lot less for a crop that's a lot more beneficial and a lot less intensive on CO2 production. So those are things I think that people are talking about in the agricultural world, and where you can interface with that, I think you can make some progress, especially in the West, especially in the Colorado River Basin. There's some serious discussion going on about how we do agriculture, and do we continue the way we have done, or do we change our model to be a little more sustainable, not just in an overall sense of efficiency, but in terms of how we allocate water, and do we export it from our region in the form of crops, or do we keep it and make crops that are more sustainable?
That's very interesting. Thank you. And I don't know if this is possible or doable, but Senator Engel, if you and Senator Kerr could get together and get a Zoom meeting that would bring rural urban concerns together and show a little bit of solidarity and learning from one another, that might do some things to break down the divide that we're living through. I want to point to the calendar. Some things were put in the chat, and I just want to underline them. One is tomorrow, 6 p.m. Solar United Neighbors. It's the Energy Rules webinar. So for those who are interested in contributing in that process, tomorrow night at 6 p.m. And there's a link. It's one of the very earliest chats tonight, if you want to find that link. Another one, the building codes. There's a building codes webinar for getting renewables support through that kind of thing. That's on the 28th. And I'm sorry that that's also linked for that is in the chat. And I believe it's also an early one. Environment Day is 3 weeks and 1 day from tonight, 8:30 to 2 on Wednesday, February 3rd. And you remember that we had the 30th, that's a week and a half, 2 weeks and a half from now on Saturday, 3 to 5 p.m. Climate Communication Workshop that Sustainable Tucson will be leading. So look for information from that from our newsletter. And what else? Let's hear from anyone else who hasn't spoken tonight. What's something that you're going to take away from tonight and improve the world with? Go ahead, surprise us and encourage us.
I can add something, Dwayne. This is Danye. I just want to say that I really appreciate Senator Engel's perspective on what's practical right now, how to make progress right now, given the situation we're in. And I just think that we need to be wise in our strategies that way. So I appreciate that kind of feedback.
And John Wakefield?
Yeah, I think we all must agree there's been some silver lining to this terrible COVID crisis, less international air travel, more stay at home, less commuting, less pollution. So there are a number of very small benefits that have accrued.
Other encouraging words?
Less air travel. So, and that's a big source of greenhouse gases.
I'd like to thank Greg for such a fine-grained look at some of the issues that we're dealing with. And I think keeping those things in mind will help us stay focused on what we need to do. And I'm really inspired by the number of people who are here. And hearing different avenues that people are aware of. Stephen Menke's insight was very important for me.
I wanted to just say I was really interested in the emphasis on the possibility of exploring the rural-urban divide and having a focus on that help bring us together to deal with some of these issues. And we've done a number of things on food security and food in Arizona, and Steve Menke's comments about the kinds of crops that we can look forward to or really should be focusing on. Looking into that a bit more, I think, is going to be become more and more important, and it's an issue that Sustainable Tucson, I think, really might want to look at more closely.
Dwayne, this is Gigi Larrington from Toxin Free Pima County. I had put in the chat, I'm just curious how many people here are aware of the nature feedback loops that are adding to the human overheating of the planet. It was called, there's a series of 5 films called Climate Emergency Nature's Feedback Loops. Dozens of them, they focus on 4 of them. And it was a very dramatic understanding that we're in deeper trouble than we thought. Is my response.
Yes, referring to many of the things that are difficult to take into account in climate modeling, because tipping over some of these points would ratchet up the speed of transition more quickly and in an unpredictable fashion. And it certainly is an argument that the conservative guesstimations of science and estimates are reliable, but they cannot take into account things that may contribute much more strongly to a more difficult to survive situation. Thank you for reminding us of that.
I could also just mention that our group is working with the city of Tucson on organic fields, and some people think grass takes too much water, but if we're going to have playing fields for our kids, an organic field regeneratively done takes less water. It actually saves water 20 to 80% and retains water. And we learned in Kiss the Ground that 40% of local rainfall is locally generated. So there's some reason. And that in the urban, rural, or agricultural versus urban, really our grass fields are cover crops. And when they're done correctly, the city of Tucson is actually participating in a carbon sequestration study to see that the organic fields actually sequester more carbon than the current ones. So just a thing to watch for as we move along.
I want to thank our speakers tonight. Thank you for bringing your very well-prepared presentations, for your work in the various realms of academia, government, economics, etc. And thank you to each person here tonight who took the time to become more educated and prepared to collaborate together through Sustainable Tucson and other entities of which we in which we participate to correct some human errors that have been long-standing. May we have success. May we support one another to the best of our abilities. And we look forward to gathering at our next meeting in February.
And on that, actually, Dwayne, on that note, I'd really like to mention we're continuing on with this focus on climate. And our next meeting is going to deal with climate impacts on health. So we're going to be looking at some of the ways in which these changes are impacting our health issues, how air quality is being affected by climate change, and moving on to the health issues, and looking at it'll probably be heat. We've got someone from Department of Environmental Quality, and we've got Charles Joffrian who will be speaking about health issues And that's going to be the second Tuesday of February. I believe it's the 10th. And that'll come out in our newsletter and on our website and all of the usual sources. But if you, by any chance, do not get the newsletter and would like to, you can send your contact information, name and email to paula@sustainabletucson.org. And we hope to see you all in February.
Paul, if I can ride on your coattails to remind people that the Sustainable Tucson Ambassadors Training Program begins shortly, Saturday, January 23rd. And the first presenter, the first workshop will be on climate, and Kathy Jacobs, a close colleague of Greg Garfin, will be the workshop leader at that time, giving us a broad overview from her perspective. She was the sort of the lead in the federal government on the third climate assessment for the nation, and she's now the director of the Climate Change Adaptation Science and Solutions program at the University of Arizona, so not to be missed. If you're not sure you could do the whole training program with the ambassadors, I think still that first event would be very worthwhile.
It is 7:30, and we part with good feelings of sustainability and making things work better this year. Thank you,
Just wanted to
everyone.
again put out the offer. I'm happy to stay on and give people a few tips on walking through the Arizona Legislature's website, if anyone wants to.
The room
stay
will
for
remain open.
that.
Thank you, Dwayne.
Thank you, Kirsten, too. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, everybody. Good to see you, Kirsten.
Yes, great to see you, Mo.
Is anyone wanting to stay on?
Okay. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, hi there. I'm Joe. I'd like to stay on and learn more.
I'll stick around a bit.
Sorry to join late. I was kind of in the middle of something, but I really appreciate the invitation and presentations.
And I will be posting the recording to our YouTube channel, wherever that is. Great.
Kirsten, do you have some basics that you'd like us to know about first?
Yes, so here, okay, I am actually sharing the screen here. Okay, so I just plugged in www.azledge.gov. You can just put in Arizona Legislature and, click that in Google, and you will get this website. And the benefits of this website, okay, if you go under bills, there's something called bill tracking, and there's bill information. This is actually the bill information part. And the benefit of this site is that you can search, let's see, I'm actually more familiar of searching by bill number. Let's see. Well, here you can search by keyword. Actually, I put in climate. See if anybody has. Oops. Does anybody have a bill on climate? Oh, here. Early childhood mental health. Okay, I guess we don't have anybody who actually has a climate bill yet. Okay, let's put in water. Okay, so you can already see all the bills that have been filed about water. Wow, there's quite a few already.
And how many of them are Gail Griffin's?
Yeah, probably 99%. Oh no, but this bill is mine. Drinking water standards pollutants. I just dropped this today. Okay, so if you click that, this is a bill dealing with PFAS and PFOS and requiring that we actually have standards for those and that they are monitored pollutants in the state of Arizona. So that's a bill. Well, it would be interesting. Actually, you can look through here and this might actually give us a sense. I haven't done this about, you know, one thing that is interesting about the legislature, and I guess this is true of any legislature, is that the number of bills that are actually heard is really just a fraction of the bills that are introduced. So, you know, we spend our time battling those bills that actually get hearings. At the same time, you know, we're trying to get hearings on our own bills. There are a lot of bills that maybe are being dropped by Republicans that maybe have good ideas. They're not getting their good ideas heard either. This might give us some insight on whether or not we have some allies out there that we don't even quite know about. Okay, what I wanted to also show you, okay, so if you go under something called bill tracking, you can see on the left here, there's this wonderful thing called search. If you press that, it opens up all these other things. And one thing that you can do is go to committee, is it committee overview or agendas? Wait a minute, agendas. So let's say you want to see what the agenda is for this week for the Senate Natural Resources Committee. You press agenda, Senate. Here's the drop-down menu of all the different committees. Here is our agenda. You double click that. And here are the bills that we are going to hear tomorrow morning. We are hearing a bill to exempt a small area of Buckeye County or Buckeye from some of the water conservation requirements because apparently they have too much water in this particular area. And then we're hearing another bill that opens up the possibility for the state land department to sell tracts of land that are smaller than 10 acres or 25% of an existing parcel. If you double click that, you can then see the language of the actual bill. Okay, so this brings up, you can either find bills that way, and then this brings you to this, or you can directly put that number, if you know a bill number, into the search box here under bills. One thing to notice up here is a drop-down menu of what legislative session you are in. So we have just started the first regular session of 2021. And if you drop down that, you can see that this goes back. I don't know how much of this is actually electronic, but you can go back and search for bills much back in time. But here, what this bill shows you is this bill will tell you who is the prime sponsor. It will tell you what committees it's assigned to. And once the bill is actually heard, that information will fill in. It will tell you if it passed out of committee. It'll tell you if it went to the floor. It'll tell you what chamber it's in. And if you double click little things, I can show you. Okay, so of course, this hasn't gone to the standing committee, but once it's voted on, this will fill in and you will see how every member voted on this particular bill. What you can see at this point is under documents. You can see the PDF of the actual bill. Here it is. So basically the way the bills are constructed in Arizona is they are provisions from the state code, and then the bill is just amendments in blue or red to the existing state code departments. It's a little bit different than the way the federal government does bills. But there also are fact sheets. These fact sheets are all written by the majority. So they're generally pretty straight up, but sometimes they don't contain the information you really need to know. But they are sometimes a good way of understanding the background on a particular issue. The Buckeye waterlogged area here in this bill. Here what I can do is I can show you let's go back to, I know this bill is coming back. Just talking about it. Okay, so this is a Griffin bill, and I was just using it to show you how this information fills in. This was a bill that was debated last year. Actually, we passed this bill. Okay, so you can see here's the third read, which is the final read in the House. We actually favored this bill. That's amazing. You can see in the Senate, here were the votes. And this bill passed through the House, but it never got through the Senate. You might recall, or whatever, the legislature actually recessed. And so basically we didn't pass very much last year at all. We recessed and then just did a budget and then ended the session last year. Another thing that you can see in here in this viewpoint, you can see the request to speak. And I don't know if any of you know about this, but this is a way that you as a citizen can say whether you favor or you're for or against a bill. In this view, and I'll show you another view in a minute, but in this view, you just see all the names. You don't actually see the comments. But if you sign up for request to speak, and I could direct you to who can tell you how to do that, but anyone can do it. And you can, after you sign up, you can do this from the comfort of your own home. You can comment on any bill that has made it onto an agenda. If it's a bill that will be considered because it's on an agenda, then you can weigh in, make a comment, and say whether you like or don't like a bill and why. In this viewpoint, you can just see that, Sandy Barr didn't like this bill. But here is lobbying organizations are listed in caps, and individuals will just be listed as self. And the date that they put in their comment will be in that. If you go to, actually what I need to do, I have to sign on in order to do this. But if you now, let's see. Let's see if we can see agendas. Just gonna be, okay. So I'm not sure the public can see this. This might be because I'm signed in myself as a legislator. What I wanted to show you is that we have access to see the comments. Okay, so here is all the comments on this particular bill that was heard today in education, HB 2018, school audits, financial records, budgets, and if you look at this, you can see people are signed in, and the way things are going remotely, people can sign in to speak on a bill. So once you sign up for this request to speak, you can find out that there's a bill on an agenda, and remotely you can sign in and say, I would like to speak on this bill. And we actually have had testimony just today for the first time allowing people to testify, not in person, having to come all the way to Phoenix, but on video through this system, because they signed up and said, yes, they wanted to speak. And then you can see that people, it's sort of like a tweet. There's only a certain number of words that can be said. I think it's like 140 words or something like that. And people can say, you know, why they support or do not support a particular bill. I know the the Pima County Democratic Party has trainings on the RTS system. I'm not even sure you need a training. There's actually some guides that are actually online here. There's videos that have been done that people have posted on how to do the RTS. The one thing I just don't know how to tell you is exactly how you sign up, because it used to be that you had to sign up in person. And I'm not sure exactly how they're handling that now. I don't think you have to sign up in person now, but I'm not sure exactly how they're handling that. So we could, I could find out that information and probably email it to all of you.
Just when it was in person, you could go to the state government building in Tucson. You didn't have to go to Phoenix.
Right, to sign up, okay.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure whether you have to do that now. I guess that's a question. Maybe you still do, I don't know. Any questions about this? I know this is kind of a quickie dive on this, but there's actually a ton of information. The other thing that you can do, let's see, what's the easiest way to do this? You can look by sponsor, as you can see. If I get out of this again, okay, remember I'm looking under the search. So you can look at agendas separately, calendars, bills, okay, but say you want to know what bills has Engel proposed so far. So you can put in sponsor. I'm a Democrat, I'm now in the Senate. Prime sponsor is that I am the person who's actually introducing the bill, as opposed to somebody who's signing on to somebody else's bill. And then this is a drop-down menu, and we're actually all listed here. Wait, I'm not here. Wait, I have bills, we've seen them. Oh, that's
Contact that clerk.
Yeah, that's frustrating. Okay, but instead, okay, let's see Victoria's bills, because I know she's dropped her EV bills. Okay, so what shows up is all of her bills. You can see her electric vehicle outlet bill. She also has her electric charging stations pilot bill. Let's see. Oh, that's 20. Oh, that's because I was looking in 2020.
I was just going to say, I think it's an old one, because I saw David Bradley there, and he was on the list.
Okay, wait, here I am.
Yeah.
Okay, oh, all's not lost. Okay, here's the bills that I have introduced so far. Okay, so what have I done? Let's see, I've got my water efficient plumbing bill. I have my vehicle, that's the clean car standards. Here's the bill to allow cities and towns to actually have their own waste disposal. Here's the drinking water. And then here's the repeal of a really obnoxious thing that the Arizona legislature did a few years ago, which prohibited cities from requiring commercial building owners from publishing information about the energy that is used in their building. So Phoenix had a very progressive city ordinance that applied to all commercial buildings, that they publish facts on the energy usage of all of their buildings, and the legislature preempted them and took away their power to do that. So this is a bill that repeals that preemption. And unfortunately, while we might hope the state legislature would be a force of good, too often it's a force of bad in preventing the cities from doing good environmental things. And this is especially the case with respect to Tucson.
I do have a question.
Yeah, sure.
It's not related to this though. It is related to the ACC, sorry, the energy rule. So if one were to actually make a public comment, I guess a telephonic comment, and try to appeal and to sway some of the commissioners to a certain like angle of looking at maybe like storage or some other components of the energy rule that was kind of like, you know, taken out. How would one be able to do that? Or would that be not the best time to kind of bring that matter up, since we're just so happy that at least, you know, most all of them are going in the same direction with that energy rule?
You know, I think, you know, letting them know what you're interested in is always, it's a, you know, it's always a good time. So you're supporting the underlying action, but you've got some things that, you know, you want them to do in particular. I would, you know, I wouldn't be shy about contacting them now. I think that they have, I'm not quite as familiar with their processes. What they do is they open a docket for the rulemakings, and I think they have opened a docket for this already. Dwayne is nodding his head, so I hope that that's right.
It's a similar setup. It's a little bit, you know, it takes a few times through it to understand how the website works, but they do make it fairly easy to comment on a docket. You can go to your website and fill in your name and stuff, and then you get to make your comment, and there's quite a bit of, you know, room there to write. So most of the comments that come into the Corporation Commission that get considered are in written form, but they also, pre-COVID, outside of COVID times, have provision for in-person sharing of comments. But so written obviously would be the main thing. Now I'm not sure about telephonic
There is
things.
telephonic on the 19th and the 20th, just for this particular docket and rule. They're allowing people to have that, and there's a passcode for it.
Well, you know, I think, you know, the more they hear how people are watching them and, you know, have comments about what they're doing, you know, the better, you know, the better policy decisions, and, you know, the more responsive I think they will be, knowing that you all are watching them and commenting on what they're doing.
Thank you.
So, you know, I mean, the main thing here is, you know, it is really pretty darn user friendly here. And there's a lot of information. The one thing, just for people to know, committees meet every week generally. And there's certain time deadlines by which they need to publish the agenda for the next week. It's 5 days. So that isn't a lot of time to get a heads up about bills that will be heard. Now, you know, maybe we have inside information that a bill will be heard at a certain time. Sometimes, generally, we kind of know, maybe we don't often know exactly when a chairperson is going to list a bill, because they're juggling various things themselves. So generally, you know, we might know the bill's in play, but we don't even know exactly when the bill ourselves will show up on an agenda. But the most you will have is 5 days notice that a bill is actually gotten onto an agenda.
Kirsten,
yeah.
It seems that there are lots of bills that one could conceivably have a half-time job, if not full-time, just combing through, finding bills, sending notes to the sponsors, etc. Most of us won't be able to do that. what would you like to see us do? What are strategic things we can do to monitor what's coming up and come in on the wave rather than after the wave?
That's a great question, and you're right. This can be an overwhelming amount of information, and you can't actually comment on a bill that hasn't gotten onto an agenda. So unfortunately, we were so thinking that this would not be the case. We so thought that we would flip at least one chamber, and we would be able to, at least in one of the chambers, really get a hearing on all of these good bills. But unfortunately, we're now back in the place of just fighting like heck to even get a hearing for these bills. So I think, but there's a lot of bad stuff that's out there that, a negative comment like this is a terrible bill and this is a bad thing. I do write a newsletter. I'm only able to get it out really every 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm not covering everything. I have to say, Sandy Barr from the Grand Canyon Sierra Club is totally amazing, and she does really keep on top of things that are going on, because she devotes full time on this. So being in touch with her, being in touch with other environmental organizations around the state that are tracking these things. They send out emails, they send out alerts. I mean, Sandy sends out alerts of, last year the Southwest gas bill came up, and she sent out alerts saying, the House Natural Resources Committee is going to be hearing this bill. It's going to preclude communities in the future from saying they want to be all electric and not having a natural gas hookup. Write your representative and senator and show up at the hearing. So getting on those lists of lobbyists who are paid to do this and do this for a living is probably the smartest thing you can do. And then maybe, if you want to have more, of your own members, maybe, one person watches the House committee, one person watches the Senate committee, maybe track these agendas. That's what I can think of.